In the spirit of the season, may each creaking floorboard, every mysterious sound, and the flickering lights in the darkness bring a shiver of joy to your spine. Gather round the fireplace, not just for warmth, but for the eerie tales that send shivers down your spine. Happy holidays. Thank you for helping us reach 200 subscribers.
My question would be to you right off the bat is why, after so many years of silence, never having a media interview, and people have said that you have given them interviews in years
Well, that's
past.
hogwash.
Yeah.
That's strictly hogwash.
So we're saying
I'm constantly told that I'm misquoted constantly, saying that I said this and I said that, and it's not happened.
So it's pretty well established on this. This is the first time you're speaking publicly about your case.
Right.
Yeah.
I've always felt that my attorneys were handling it, and they said to keep a low profile and stay away from it. And in light of all that has been used against me in the media, they've created this fantasy monster image, and it's been going on for the last 12 years. And I've ever had no comment, and I had no need to talk to the media for the simple reason that they were looking for sensationalism and they were looking for the monster.
When you say fantasy monster image, what are you referring to by that?
Well, the idea that I'm a homosexual thrill killer and all that garbage, and they painted this image of me that like I strolled down the streets and stalked young boys and slaughtered them. Hell, if you could see my schedule, my work schedule, you know damn well that I was never out there.
Well, you were indicted, convicted, and sentenced on 33 counts of homicide. Is that correct?
That's correct.
John Wayne Gacy was born on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, to John Stanley Gacy and Marion Elaine Robison. His father, an auto repair machinist and World War I veteran, struggled with alcoholism and beat John and his two sisters with a razor strap if they were perceived to have misbehaved. John's father frequently belittled him, calling him stupid and comparing him disparagingly to his sisters. His mother tried to shield her son from his father's abuse, which resulted in accusations that he was a sissy and a mama's boy who would probably grow up queer. Gacy's psychosexual history began between the ages of 6 and 10, when a teenage daughter of one of his mother's friends reportedly undressed and played with him. Gacy was molested at a young age by a family friend and contractor, and between ages 10 and 12, Gacy and a friend were accused of sexually fondling a young girl. A sickly, overweight, uncoordinated child, Gacy was unable to perform at sports or bond with children his own age. He suffered alienation at school, unable to play with other children due to a congenital heart condition that was looked upon by his father as another failing. He experienced frequent seizures and blackouts as a teen and was regularly in and out of hospitals, though his father accused him of faking the ailments for attention. Gacy later realized he was attracted to men and experienced great turmoil over his sexuality. Despite not graduating from high school, Gacy attended and graduated from the Northwestern Business College in Chicago, then worked as a salesman and manager at a shoe company. In 1964, he met and became engaged to Marlyn Myers, whose father owned 3 KFC restaurants in Waterloo, Iowa. Gacy relocated there to manage the restaurants, and he and Myers had 2 children together. Gacy became a self-made building contractor and Democratic precinct captain in the Chicago suburbs. He later speculated his political involvement might have been an attempt to antagonize his father, who mocked his interest in politics. And maybe it was a way to get acceptance. Gacy said, "I was always looking for acceptance because my dad made me feel that I was never good enough." Gacy was a member of a Chicago-area Jolly Joker clown club and frequently performed in clown attire and makeup at children's parties, charity fundraisers, and other events as his alter egos Pogo the Clown or Patches the Clown. Years later, during a conversation with detectives while he was under surveillance, Gacy discussed his work as a clown, remarking on how clowns can get away with murder. In August 1967, Gacy sexually assaulted 15-year-old Donald Voorhees Jr., the son of Donald Edwin Voorhees, a local politician and fellow JC. Gacy lured Voorhees to his house with the promise of showing him heterosexual stag films regularly played at JC events. Gacy filled Voorhees with alcohol, allowed him to watch a stag movie, then persuaded him to engage in mutual oral sex, adding, "You have to have sex with a man before you start having sex with women." Over the following months, Gacy abused several other youths, including one whom he encouraged to have sex with his own wife before blackmailing him into performing oral sex on him. Gacy also tricked several teenagers into believing he was commissioned to conduct homosexual experiments for scientific research and paid them up to $50 each. In March 1968, Voorhees told his father that Gacy had sexually assaulted him. Voorhees Sr. immediately informed the police, who arrested Gacy. On August 30, 1968, Gacy promised one of his employees, 18-year-old Russell Schroeder, $300 if he physically assaulted Voorhees to discourage the boy from testifying in court. Schroeder lured Voorhees to an isolated country park, sprayed mace in his eyes, then beat him. Voorhees escaped and reported the assault to police, identifying Schroeder as his attacker. They arrested him the following day. Police laid an additional charge of hiring Schroeder to assault and intimidate Voorhees on Gacy. On September 12th, Gacy was ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation at the Psychiatric Hospital of the University of Iowa. 2 doctors concluded he had an antisocial personality disorder, the clinical term for sociopathy or psychopathy. The most striking aspect of the test results is the patient's total denial of responsibility for everything that has happened to him. He can produce an alibi for everything. He presents himself as a victim of circumstances and blames other people who are out to get him. The patient attempts to assure a sympathetic response by depicting himself as being at the mercy of a hostile environment. His wife divorced him and received full custody of their children. As a model prisoner, Gacy was released on parole in the summer of 1970 after serving 18 months of his sentence. However, Gacy was arrested again the following year after another teen claimed he lured him into his car and drove him to his house, where Gacy tried to force him into sex. The charges were dropped when the boy didn't appear during the trial. With financial assistance from his mother, Gacy bought a house on 8213 West Summerdale Avenue in Norwood Park, Illinois, where all his future murders would take place. In 1971, Gacy started a construction business called PDM Contractors, which grew rapidly and he became financially successful. That year, Gacy also became engaged to Carol Hoff, whom he briefly dated in high school. The two were married in 1972. Most of his employees at PDM Contractors were high school students and young men who he would proposition for sex, sometimes under the threat of violence. Nevertheless, Gacy kept up a public front as a community man, hosting summer parties that were popular and well attended. Gacy committed his first known murder in January 1972 after luring the 16-year-old Timothy McCoy to his house for sex. The next morning, Gacy saw McCoy standing in the bedroom doorway with a knife and rushed to attack him, wrestling the knife away and stabbing McCoy to death. Afterward, Gacy belatedly realized that McCoy hadn't been attacking or threatening Gacy, but rather was holding the knife because he had just made them breakfast. Nevertheless, Gacy discovered he received sexual gratification from killing McCoy and later said, "That's when I realized that death was the ultimate thrill." Another of Gacy's victims was John Butkovich, an 18-year-old PDM employee, whom Gacy lured to his house with a promise to discuss overdue pay. Once there, Gacy gave him alcohol, tricked him into putting handcuffs on, and then strangled him. The use of handcuffs became a frequent method for Gacy, who would sometimes tell his victims he was showing them a magic trick. By the middle of the 1970s, 2 more young men accused Gacy of rape, and he was questioned by police about the disappearances of others. Gacy referred to this period of his life as his cruising years, when he committed most of his murders. Most of his victims were buried on the property, with several placed in a common grave underneath his crawl space. One of his victims, a 17-year-old PDM employee named Gregory Godzik, told his family that Gacy had earlier ordered him to dig trenches in the crawl space at his home. Gacy later told police he arranged this work to create space for graves. After Godzik went missing, his family contacted Gacy, who told them that Godzik had confided to Gacy that he planned to run away from home. Gacy killed several more victims, but one he left alive was Robert Donnelly, a 19-year-old college student he abducted from a Chicago bus stop. After bringing him to his house, Gacy raped and tortured Donnelly, dunking his head repeatedly in a bathtub until he passed out and performing fake executions with a gun loaded with blanks. Donnelly was in so much pain he begged Gacy to kill him, but Gacy let him go and warned him not to tell anybody. Donnelly reported him to the police, however. When officers investigated, Gacy said it was a consensual sex slavery encounter, and the police believed him. By 1978, Gacy's crawl space had no more space for bodies, and he started to dispose of his victims in the Des Plaines River from a bridge off Interstate 55. On December 11, 1978, 15-year-old Robert Peast went missing after telling his mother he was going to meet Gacy to discuss a potential construction job. Peast's family filed a missing person report with the police, which led to a search of Gacy's house in Norwood Park. Authorities discovered several suspicious items there, including police badges, a pistol, hypodermic needles, pornographic films, and items that they later learned belonged to some of Gacy's victims. After a lengthy period of police surveillance and investigation, police discovered a receipt in Gacy's house that had belonged to Piest, contradicting Gacy's claim that he had no contact with Piest the day he went missing. This resulted in further searches of Gacy's house, eventually leading to the discovery of several trenches filled with human remains in the crawl space beneath his house. Gacy eventually confessed to killing about 30 people. In 1979, months after Gacy's arrest, his house at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue in Norwood Park, Illinois, was dismantled to find more evidence. The following year, the house and all structures on the property were demolished, and a new house was eventually built on the property. According to one worker involved in the demolition of Gacy's house, "If the devil's alive, he lived here." With Gacy having confessed to the crimes, the arguments were focused on whether he could be declared insane and thus remitted to a state mental facility. Gacy spent hundreds of hours with doctors at the Menard Correctional Center in Chester, Illinois, and underwent a series of psychology tests. Gacy tried to argue he had multiple personality disorder and that his mind was split between the personalities of a contractor, clown, politician, and police officer named Bad Jack. Gacy claimed Bad Jack hated homosexuality and viewed male prostitutes and some of Gacy's victims as scum, weak, stupid, and degraded. Gacy pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, and he went to trial on 33 murder charges. The prosecution argued Gacy was sane and in control of his actions, pointing to the elaborate steps Gacy took to both prepare for and conceal his murders. These were certainly the acts of a man capable of premeditation, acting in his own best interest, and recollecting the details of his criminal activities, said Chief Prosecutor William Kunkel. Mental health professionals testified for both sides about Gacy's mental state. On March 12, 1980, after a short jury deliberation, Gacy was found guilty of committing 33 murders, and he became known as one of the most ruthless serial killers in American history. Gacy was imprisoned at the Menard Correctional Center in Chester for 14 years, appealing the sentence and offering contradictory statements on the murders in interviews. Although he had previously confessed, Gacy later denied being guilty of the charges and had a 900 telephone number set up with a 12-minute recorded statement declaring his innocence. After the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear Gacy's final appeal in October 1993, an execution date was set for May 10, 1994, at the Statesville Correctional Center in Crest Hill, Illinois. Before his death, Gacy said the victims' families would get no comfort from his death and accused the state of murdering him. His last words were reportedly, "Kiss my ass," but the prosecutor who tried the case and attended his execution said Gacy didn't speak in his final moments. Gacy was executed by lethal injection.
An overview of the business that you eventually established, the construction work. Is this self-taught then, the construction and maintenance work?
I started doing painting, and then I started doing wallpapering and decorating. And inside of 3 years, PDM, which is painting, decorating, and maintenance, was doing $1 million a year.
Did not search the house at that time or look through the house?
No. According afterwards, they're claiming that they came to the front door of the house and knocked on the door and that I hid from them.
Why didn't you let them in at that time when they were knocking at the front door?
There was no way I could have heard them. I was way in the back of the house, in the rec room, on the telephone. And they wanted me to come down to the police station. Okay, well, I didn't have time because I was doing work for the county and stuff. For me to come in and give me an account of my whereabouts. The thing of it is that And that same day, they held me there for 9 hours. And while holding me there for 9 hours, they executed a search warrant. The first search warrant was executed on December 13th. They had me under surveillance. The only trouble is that the Mickey Mouse way they were doing it, they had 2 cars following me day and night. Where the Summerdale house is located is built on a clay field. And when it rained, the rain would come down from both ends and would flood from one house to the other. The crawl space would fill up with water. In 1976, I asked a landscaper, I said, what do you do for that sour odor of clay? And he said, spread white lime, just regular masonry lime. On the ground, he said, it'll sweeten up the clay and you won't have that odor. It's sort of like what charcoal does in filtering things. That's why the lime was spread in the crawl space.
How much lime was spread down there eventually?
I think 700 or 800 pounds of it.
First of the 33.
Tim McCoy was the first one, and Tim McCoy's name wasn't put on him until 1988. Prior to that, he was known as Unknown Number 9, and he was buried by me in the crawl space. That's the only knowledge that I have of it.
What was the circumstances of that?
He was killed in the house in self-defense.
And who killed him then?
I stabbed him.
Yeah, and it was an issue of self-defense. Why was he in the process of assaulting you, or what?
He was coming at me with a knife. I just took the knife away and twisted it in his hand, and that's what killed him.